Hey everyone, it's Barbie Jane, and thank you so much for choosing today's video where we are talking about mastering conflict resolution. If this is your first time watching any of my videos, I just want to introduce myself. It's Barbie Jane is a business that is here to help you be personally and professionally better so that you can upskill and choose options of different jobs that you want to do today or in the future. So let's get into the content of this. In mastering conflict resolution, we're going to go through 3 different objectives. The first one includes recognizing common causes and types of workplace and personal conflicts that happen. There's so many conflicts in today's world, but we're going to try to dive in and to understand it a little bit better. We're going to gain practical techniques so that we can handle and resolve conflicts that occur. And third, we're going to develop communication skills that foster collaboration and trust. Again, reducing the amount of conflict that happens in any of those situations. Now, let's talk about the common causes of conflict. Conflict is everywhere, from our personal lives to our professional lives, through our small, close groups, into a bigger amount of close groups, and even in the world that we live in today. But there are 5 reasons of causes that, better yet, causes these conflicts. The first one is miscommunication. A lot of times, we get into these bouts where we're constantly speaking, but we never really understand each other. And when we're in that position of not understanding each other, that's where miscommunication occurs. The second one is unclear expectations. Now, in the workplace and even at home, anytime you ask for something, you always got to be clear and concise with what you're asking for or the message that you're trying to get across. And that is so important because whenever there's unclear communication and unclear expectations, people get lost in the sauce. People get confused as to what you're really trying to communicate. The third one is personality differences. Now, everyone is different. And this is where it gets super tricky because you can never speak to one person the same way that you speak to another person, right? There's always a thing where we just got to be mindful about who we're speaking to, the type of delivery that's important. What is the tone that we're going to be using when we speak to each other? And so these are all different pieces that play into understanding how to talk to one person over the other. We never have a one-size-fits-all type of conversation because we got to think about those biases based on a person's personality, their perspective, and what they're currently going through. The fourth one is the competition for resources. Now, when I talk about competition for resources, now this is more like in a professional setting, right? Conflict happens because if we ask for something or if we have an expectation of someone, we want to make sure that we give them the tools in order to do those things. Let me give you an example. The best one is in the workplace. If you have someone perform or request for someone to perform a certain task, but you do not give them any resources, if they need to simply write a paper, let's just say physically writing a paper, but you don't give them a pencil to do that, how are they going to write with a paper, right? And so I know that's such a simple analogy, but I want you to think about the mindset behind it. If I went to you and I asked you to write a paper, write an essay, whatever, and I don't give you the pencil, what are the thoughts that are running in your mind, right? You're starting to think, well, how am I going to write if I don't even have the tools to write it? If I don't even have a pencil to write it? And yeah, they're small thoughts, but guess what happens to those small thoughts? That thought ends up becoming frustration or confusion. And you start to wonder, well, why didn't you give me everything that I need, right? And although that starts to fester and that turns into anger, that turns into confusion, that turns into conflict, when you think about that very first setback, the fact that you did not have a resource, that initial issue created the thought, created the conflict. And so if you want to make sure that you reduce any conflict, if you are requesting for anything or if you are asking someone to perform a task, you want to ensure that you are giving them the exact resources that they need. And that leads me on to my fifth piece, which is unmet needs. Conflict often occurs because we just have needs that are not being fulfilled and not being met. And so if we're in our personal lives, we want to make sure that we always think about what are the things that our family needs, what are the things that our friends need, and that we support them with so we reduce those amount of conflicts. But more importantly, in a workplace, if you have expectations, jobs, duties that needs to be completed, make sure you support them with the needs so that it reduces any forms of conflict as well. Now let's talk about the 5 steps of resolving a conflict. In a conflict, oftentimes it leads into arguments. And unfortunately, the reality of a conflict and an argument is that we are so easy to match the level of negativity that is portrayed or that is in front of us. But if we want to resolve a conflict, we got to be mindful and we got to be conscious to be able to stay calm at the level that we want to be in or that we should be in. Because if we match negative energy with negative energy, oh my gosh, an explosion of anger ends up happening. So we want to make sure that we stay calm. The next thing that we want to do is to actively listen. Now, actively listening is not just hearing everything and just taking it all in, but it's actually listening and understanding what they're trying to do. The other thing that we always make a mistake on is that whenever we hear someone, we're just so quick to respond, right? We're listening because we want to respond immediately. But we need to be able to listen, to understand, in order to be able to actually hear what is happening and what's going on. The third thing is we want to be able to find common ground. Now, one of the things I always say is that sometimes we just have to learn that it's okay to agree to disagree. And I say that because a lot of times when we're in a conflict and an argument with someone, we want to always be the person that's right or the person that the other person is wrong. But we can always have 2 different views and we don't always have to push our views towards someone else. And with that, if we want to be able to accept that, hey, you got your view and I got my view, we also got to accept that it's okay to agree to disagree. And that way, when we finally get into that point, we can find common ground. What is something that works for you, but also works for me as we try to resolve an issue? The next one is offer solutions. That ties into finding that common ground. Sometimes we just got to lay out all the different options in front of us and we pick a resolving action that's going to satisfy us both better yet. We want to always do that because, again, it's not one way or the highway as you're trying to resolve a conflict. You want to make sure that it both appeases you, the 2 of you better yet, that's in that conflict. And lastly, as you resolve the conflict, you want to make sure that whatever you agree on, you follow through. That follow through portion is super important because how many times do you hate it when someone tells you something and then they don't stick to their word? It's super frustrating, right? And so you yourself, as you resolve the conflict, you want to make sure that whatever you agree on, you really stick to it and you follow through. Because that also builds trust and loyalty and makes sure that that relationship that you're in stays strong even after a conflict. Now, I want to leave you with 5 communication tips before this video ends. The first one is use I statements. Now, the reason why this is so important is because whenever we get into an argument or a conflict, it's so easy for us to blame someone and make them the reason for this issue that's happening. However, if instead of blaming someone, you use the I statement and you start to speak about how you feel or what you're thinking, it takes away the blame and it shifts it towards what's really going on in your mind so that they can also empathize and feel what you're feeling. The second one is to stay solution focused. Now, solution focus, again, it's a shift in our mindset and it's not all the negativity. Now we're just in the mindset of trying to fix things. If you want to move forward from a solution or from a conflict, you want to be able to find solutions. The next one is to control your emotions. Like I mentioned earlier, in a conflict, it's so easy for us to try to match the negative energy because that's what we see. And we want to counter, right? We want to be able to defend what we're saying or what we feel. But as we're doing that, oftentimes our natural self wants to show emotion, negative emotions, and just be at a high level and high energy. But if we control our emotions, we can stay focused and we can stay level-headed in those situations. The next one is to be respectful. Again, it's so easy for us to get into a high level of anxiousness, of anger, and everything. But if we have respect in our forefront, no matter which way that conflict goes, we continue to move forward in a positive light, even though it's negative, because we are being respectful towards each other. And lastly, if there's misunderstandings, which obviously in a conflict, there's a lot of misunderstandings, you want to make sure that you clarify anything that's confusing. Because sometimes confusion happens because of miscommunication. And sometimes that miscommunication just could be a misunderstanding of how something is said and how it's being received. And so you want to make sure that you always clarify what you hear and what you understand it to be. And if I could leave you with one tip of the day and before this video ends, that is to listen to understand, not to respond. Now, this is such an important tip because when you hear someone speak, we're so quick to just respond, right? Because we hear the first things. It's that first level of hearing. However, if we actively listen, which was one of the tips earlier, we want to make sure that we're not listening to respond, but we're actually listening to understand what they're saying. So as I end this video, I want to let you know that conflict is around us no matter which way, because we don't always feel, understand, and think like other people do. And so it's so important that we understand how to resolve conflicts so that we can be more in peace in our personal and our professional lives. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you like it. I hope it helps you, and I hope it helps you reduce the amount of conflict that you experience every single day. And I encourage you to check out all my other videos that's going to help you both in your personal and your professional life, and that's what I hope to continue to do. Bye!